Hi everybody. This is entitled Differentiation Moves with Different Levels of Systems Anxiety. The anxiety I feel in me and the anxiety that will be in the system if I begin to change or to make a difference in the system. And I want to talk about these different types of moves that we make depending upon the anxiety that we're feeling and anxiety in the system. Earlier moves work with lower anxiety don't work as well in situations in which there's higher anxiety. Lower anxiety moves don't work as well in high anxiety situations because we're more off balance. We feel more anxiety. And so one of the things we want to do is to evaluate our own level of anxiety or possible reactivity and the reactivity in the system that we're about to confront or about to make a move in which we change ourselves. We're not actually doing it to change the system, we're doing it to change us in the system. But they will feel as though they're being forced to change. And in some ways they are, because if I'm a puzzle piece in a puzzle and I change my size, well, then the puzzle all around me has to change to accommodate the piece in that puzzle. And they would like me to stay the same shape. Well, if I start growing and becoming more self-differentiated, then others have to adjust to my changes. I've given the example in previous videos that I've done on YouTube and such about the family prayer. And I remember how much anxiety I felt about telling my mother and asking her that I don't want to be the only one that does the family prayer when we get together and bless the food, etc. Because it always fell on me. I was the pastor at the time. I was a pastor at the time. And so everyone would just turn and look at me and have me do it. And that particularly happened after my father died, that I got that role, and I didn't like always doing that. I don't know why. I don't want to be the pastor in the family. And so, because the anxiety was so high, because I was new to self-differentiation, I used a more straightforward approach, which is making an I statement of this is really what I would rather not do. And I had tried to get my mom to see that before we went to a family dinner, but she was not going to have it. She was going to turn to me at that moment in front of all the family and say, okay, Jerry, you're on. And I thought, I've got to keep to my boundaries. Now, with greater self-differentiation, or as I grew and would have less anxiety and less reactivity, I then can do different moves rather than just making I statements. I could say, well, gosh, am I the only person who can talk to God? Maybe we should have some other people do that. A more of a playful type of move that I would make to self-differentiate. But since I was so anxious, it was better if I just kept it straightforward with an I position. And so let me talk about the high anxiety situation and detachment moves we would use in a high anxiety situation. Just do clear I positions. This is what I want. I don't see it the same way. This is what I need. This is what I believe. These are my values. This is how I feel. Clearly stating values, beliefs, preferences, and needs. We want to, in a high anxiety situation, stay in our head because you're already overloaded with feelings in a high anxiety situation. So I want to kind of block what's going on down here. And I want to stay up here, observing and not absorbing what's going on in the family system. We may want to do a temporary distance. We may want to use some physical distance as a differentiation move. Of course, except in the case of verbal or physical abuse or harm, something like that, then we certainly would want to do more of a more permanent physical distancing. Self-talk can be very helpful during high anxiety situations of, this really isn't my problem. I don't want to do the family prayer, or I'm not trying to do that. I want to change that. And there's nothing wrong with me doing it. It doesn't make me less of a pastor or less of a Christian or less of a person. And so using self-talk is helpful in high anxiety situations. Using healthy triangles with another to gain emotional attachment. We might want to talk to a friend or a therapist, a coach, a sponsor, but not gossip in that way, but to use them to help us differentiate more. Then we can use a defocusing method in high anxiety situations, where we do journaling, prayer, meetings, readings, keeping busy when we have those kinds of high anxiety situations. If you're heading towards a high anxiety situation, obsessing about it is not going to bring your anxiety down. Use other defocusing methods to keep your anxiety down. Now let me talk about like a moderate anxiety, not the highly charged anxiety, but the moderate anxiety. The detachment moves would also be I positions are always good in all three levels of anxiety. Prevent and resist emotional cutoffs. I don't want to, I don't want to just immaturely cut off from other people. In the high anxiety, I may have to do some cutoff while I get myself balanced and get myself under control. In lower anxiety or moderate anxiety, we want to then resist that cutoff. We want to resist triangles. We want to resist the enmeshment. Due to some anxiety relief, this is a time when we can begin to look at what's going on versus only seeing my pain or being in my reactivity. With lower anxiety, we can kind of look at that now. It's harder to do that when we have high anxiety or the system has a lot of high anxiety in it. We also want to ask and answer systems-based questions, such as what role does my reactivity, what role does my desire to cut off play in the family? And also, what role does their need to keep me in this role play in the family? Those are systems questions. Look at the positive aspects of negative behavior of others. In other words, why are people doing negative things? What are the positive aspects of that for the system? Because everybody's operating to keep the equilibrium and the homeostasis of the family and of the relationship. We can also be be an opponent for the other side or any other side. In other words, take their role and see what's going on. If I were my mom, if I were my brother, my sister, other family members, what would I be feeling? What would I be thinking? And identify what's going on in the system. With regard to intimacy and feelings, which I noticed I just missed in the first, let me go back to the high anxiety. With regard to intimacy and feelings, for the high anxiety, resist intimacy and making yourself vulnerable, offering over only limited information. Become a connected adversary or observer. Resist any feelings focus on the goal and the behavior in the high anxiety. What is my goal? What do I want to communicate? Not what are all my feelings? What's going on? In a moderate anxiety situation, you can look more at your feelings without them playing into the family system as much. We also, in the moderate anxiety, we may want to resist sharing feelings and acting on those feelings because probably we will be still reactive. But we become aware in the moderate anxiety, we become aware of feelings, examine the role of our feelings in the system, and it's helpful for us to think about our feelings. In the low anxiety situation, in relationships and in family dynamics, we then can do these moves when the anxiety is lower for us and probably even for the system. Now we can see more of what's going on and have some sense of detachment. The relationship or situation is now not equal to my personal survival. Whereas in the higher anxiety, we feel that this situation is about my existence. It's so difficult, and I just feel like it's just that this is so important that I can't get any detachment from it. Reversals and paradoxical moves such as out-kooking or being stupid or being non-serious about an over-serious emotional state in others can also be utilized in lower anxiety situations, which is the process of going against one's instincts or going against what the situation calls for. This can be done either verbally or behaviorally. I used to do treatment for alcoholics and addicts many years ago and worked inpatient treatment with them as the family therapist and family counselor. And someone would come into detox and say, this is the worst treatment I've ever been to. This is the worst program and it stinks. And many times addicts and alcoholics would come in very angry, very upset, and they would take it out on the counselors and the staff, etc. If I have a lower anxiety situation, I can then say, well, you're right. Wait till you get out of detox. I hear it's even worse. And again, that's a playful response to what they want me to feel. They'd like me to defend the program and defend no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to say, if you think it's bad now, wait till... And that begins to keep me self-differentiated and allows the problem to remain with them. Going against my feelings is a good way to stay detached and not get hooked. If I feel I need to rescue or caretake in this lower anxiety situation, I try to discover some ways to become unhelpful. So if I feel like I want to do this, do the opposite. How about if I become unhelpful? I have a situation I remember. I always hated when people would come to the church. I don't know them. They'd come, knock on the door, and they'd say, hey, we need $50 to get on the road and do all of this. Well, I knew they probably were using drugs. They probably were doing other things more than likely and didn't have that money. And so instead of being helpful, I would say, well, the church has a lot of problems and, I haven't felt well lately. And do you know what I have to do all day? And they're not expecting that kind of answer. They're expecting me to feel guilty, to try to defend the goodness of the church, to act like I'm this wonderful, great Christian, when actually they're in many ways trying to play me. And if they're trying to play me, I will just throw the play back. If the situation calls for seriousness, but it keeps you hooked, nobody wants to talk about something in the family, for example, then you could joke about it or out-kook it. Just like I had given in a recent video I just put up, in which it was about I was always being in the role and forced to do the family blessing for all the meals, and I didn't know why I was the one chosen to do that all the time. And so then I was able to joke about it and say, well, am I the only one who can talk to God here in the family? That's a joking about it or out-kooking them wanting me to stay in my role. So humor and playfulness can be useful in a lower anxiety situation. In terms of intimacy and feelings, we can share intimate feelings safely and begin to be a little more emotionally vulnerable. And we can act on our feelings when the anxiety is low, because more than likely we're becoming aware of true feelings and not just caught up in systems feelings, which we will get caught up in as the anxiety goes up. I wanted to share this today with you. I hope it's a help to think about high, moderate, and low level anxieties and what you can do different in those different circumstances. Thank you for watching.